Lily Martin Spencer was a significant female artist in American history. Although she was born in England in 1822, she spent the majority of her life in both Ohio and then New York City, where she died in 1902. Spencer produced many genre paintings, a style that began in the Netherlands that focused on portraying secular scenes of everyday life. When Spencer began her career in Cincinnati in the mid-19th century, she actually did not receive much formal training. This lack of art education does somewhat present itself in her painting style, one that has been described by Elizabeth Chu, a writer for the Smithsonian, as awkward due to its hard outlines and colors. Despite her quirky technique, Spencer sold her paintings during a time in which scenes of domestic life were quite popular with the American public, particularly, as Linda Figler from Ohio Magazine notes, with the middle class because they liked recognizing their lives in the art on the wall. This middle-class fascination with her work led her to remarkable success, even in such a male-dominated space. April Maston, in her academic article, Shake Hands, Lily Martin Spencer and the Politics of Art, also attributes this artist's appeal to American audiences due to her work operating both in and against sentimental culture by demonstrating the influence of domestic ideology on her choice of subjects and the ways in which Spencer poked fun at, sexually enhanced, and enshrined the domestic realm. Ultimately, too, the artist gained popularity thanks to her paintings expressing a democratic sensibility that was shared by her public. As a result, Spencer and her husband both defied 19th century gender roles. While Spencer became the family's main breadwinner, her husband left his place of employment to help care for their 13 children. Many assume that this desire to seek financial independence, which caused the artist to become the very model of a 21st century businesswoman, was influenced by Spencer's parents, both activists who were part of the abolitionist and women's suffrage movements. War Spirit at Home is a bustling, innovative image of domestic life that incorporates elements of both history, portrait, and genre painting. When examining this painting from 1866, it is important to note that the artist's radical views may have been an influence. In fact, the time in which this painting was produced was during the first wave of feminism. Keeping with the upcoming feminist perspectives of her time, Jochen Wierich, a curator at the Northwest Museum of Arts and Culture, states in his article, War Spirit at Home, Lily Martin Spencer, Domestic Painting and Artistic Hierarchy, that the absence of a father figure and the assertive role of the mother lend credibility to Spencer's painting as a statement against patriarchal order. This symbolically nuanced painting, which humorously presents to viewers a household consisting of 4 children, their mother, and their servant, depicts the family's various responses to learning of the Union troops' Civil War victory, which occurred on July 4th of 1863, and the work may reflect how Spencer herself navigated the country's changing sense of self. The most visible reactions to the news come from the 3 older children who actively dance around in a celebratory circle. They play soldiers and, as art historian Ronan Barris from Radford University writes, they do so merrily without awareness of the fact that war means more than victory and celebration. Through their actions as well, the war, not just in word through the newspaper, has been brought into the home. Examining the children more closely, we can see that the toddler in the center carries a stick as a rifle and wears a paper hat. The boy in the back wears a differently shaped paper hat and blows a toy horn. And the girl, who is apparently modeled off of Spencer's own daughter, Angelique, bangs a cooking pot with a spoon, creating a makeshift drum. Some observers of this element of the painting believe that the young girl's incredibly noisy and unladylike use of the household objects represents the kind of noise Spencer herself had to make to succeed in a man's professional world. The colors and clothing in War Spirit at Home can be analyzed as well. The young girl's red dress paired next to her mother's blue and white gown works to bind the 2 figures together, and also may have been Spencer's way of hinting at how women became central to patriotic service for the United States as the country came out of the war. In addition, the young girl is the only one to wear a true Union cap, known as a kepi, which implies that, unlike her brothers, she is not play-acting at being a soldier. Instead, it is as though she is an allegorical figure, protesting for the equality of the sexes by showing that women should be able to fight for their country's freedom too. The fact that the girl's dress is slipping off her shoulder could also symbolize the country's state of disarray at this moment in time. On another note, the servant's black dress, by blending into the darker background of the painting, gives her a feeling of humbleness but also implies her low status in the hierarchy of the family. Viewers can easily observe this power difference between the servant and the rest of the family members. As the servant works, actively cleaning a dish while she watches the chaotic scene in front of her, the mistress is at leisure enough to read the newspaper, and the children are free to play. The mother and servant's expressions and purpose in the painting are a bit harder to understand. The former, whose face is tilted away from the audience, appears to still be engrossed in the copy of the New York Times that she holds, perhaps insistent to continue reading so as to better understand what this victory means for the country. While the latter, the servant, seems to disapprove of the woman reading and her lack of proper household management that is the consequence of the perhaps neglectful attitude that she appears to have toward her children and the infant in her lap. If the servant does disapprove of her mistress, the maid's presence could serve to represent the kind of criticism that 19th century American society would have directed towards a house so out of control. The possible disdain painted on the servant's face may also be a reflection of Spencer's tension-filled perspectives of her own servants, as she is known to have viewed them as lazy, dishonest, and thieving, or at least refers to the mistress-servant relationship, since the servant has been placed at a distance to show that she's relegated to work outside the family circle. Further interpretations of the servant's expressions are that she empathizes with the pressures and responsibilities that the mother bears, as the wife may have lost her husband in the war, or that the servant's reaction is simply a sign of her own exhaustion. Although some may see this as a bit of a stretch, it is possible that, because the servant's skin is darker than the other figures in the painting, Spencer wished to open up a conversation for viewers regarding the servant's race. If she's supposed to be African American, then her glance back in the newspaper makes sense, as hearing of the Union's victory meant something entirely different for her than the white family she served. Undoubtedly, her future as a Black individual in America would be changed forever. In an essay by Rena Tobey titled Art Essay, Lily Martin Spencer and War Spirit at Home, A Provocative Voice, she argues that the mother's reading of the newspaper highlights the new role of the indirect eyewitness. The newspaper was viewed as a symbol of authority and, because it reported news from the world, it also stood in as a symbol of the public sphere, which was the male domain. Here, news consumption has been moved into the domestic sphere, with no men to make this activity more acceptable. It also charges the scene with historic significance. The Civil War was considered the first living room war, with photography providing graphic images of what war really looked like and illustrations of battle and camp-like scenes. Having a woman read such potentially distressing information indicates how the Civil War upturned convention, giving women agency in new ways. Furthermore, Tobey touches on how, while the newspaper grants the mother the same power that is usually held by the father, it also divides the mother from her other children, leading some to critique her as indifferent or absent-minded. But, with the mother's precarious hold on the baby, Spencer may also allude to her own juggling in the two spheres, since painting sales were crucial to the family's domestic comfort. Taking a look at the painting compositionally, closer examination of the image's presentation reveals that there is distance between each figure. In fact, none of them are directly touching one another at all. This decision by Spencer is believed by our historian Ronan Barris to actually symbolize the disunity within the family. This sense of domestic chaos would have ensued due to the absence of a man who would normally govern the household. Additionally, the positioning seen in War Spirit at Home may have a deeper meaning as well. As written in an article by art historian Rena Tobey, a visible cross created by the fold in the mother's newspaper and the position of the child on the mother's lap, which resembles the iconic pose of a Pietà, a popular subject in Christian art where Mary is shown embracing Christ's dead body, points to the mother's role in the painting as a religious figure who represents Christian suffering from the pain of war and symbolizes the mother's, often unrecognized, sacrifices for her family. On a lighter note, many academics who analyze the artwork think that the children marching out of the dark background might symbolically be the hope of the future emerging from the symbolic martyrdom expressed in the newspaper in the Pietà scene on the right. Ultimately, although War Spirit at Home remains open to several interpretations, it is undoubtedly a piece that subverted the conventions of its time. By displaying a household without a patriarch, a mother who holds the written word and thus puts herself in a position of authority wherein she has acquired the social and familial power usually afforded to the man of the house, a daughter whose actions rebel against accepted notions of ways in which young girls and women should behave, and a servant whose color of skin sparks discussions about race and the future for African Americans after the war, Lily Martin Spencer allowed her usual mother and child scene, one of the domestic, unpolitical sphere, to be invaded by the ever-evolving outside world.